Welcome to the Women's Football Show here on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. I'm Kerry Pollock, Alison McConnell joins me, and Hamilton Accies boss Robert Watson is on my left as well. Let's have a look at the results from the weekend. It was Hibs 0, Rangers 3, Montrose 7, Hamilton 0, Dundee United 0, Hearts 3, Celtic 6, Thistle 1, Spartans 1, Motherwell 4, Glasgow City 8, Aberdeen 1. First of all, Robert, let's talk through it. What went wrong in your eyes?
Yeah, I think it was a strange afternoon. I think anyone who's sitting in the stand at half-time is thinking at nothing each. This game could probably go either way. It was very, very even. But I think that the first goal of the match was key, and we've got to be honest with ourselves. And you know, we've just allowed the disappointment maybe of that first goal, or not reacted particularly well to it, and we've just let the game run away from us. And you know, I'm certainly not going to sit here and criticise the players, because over the last couple of weeks they've been brilliant. They've been brilliant since the turn of the year. I think what we need to look at is just context. It's a sore one. It's never nice to lose by that. I think it's, you know, one half of bad football. You know, it's just, as I say, it's ran away from us. But the context is it's 3 points, and there's still 3 points between 4 teams, and you know, that's where we're not going to get carried away, and you know, and realise that there's still a long way to go. 10 games and 30 points is still a massive amount of football to be played. Was
that the message after the game to the girls? Not to get your heads too far down, we're still in it here?
Yeah, I think ultimately we need to take responsibility, and that's not just the players, that's the coaches as well. You know, ultimately it's down to us to set the team up. We need to look back and see, did we get anything wrong? You know, I'm a big believer in you need to look inwards first, especially when you've had a setback like yesterday. But it's one setback. We've had plenty of setbacks over the year, and we've done well to come back from it. We had two brilliant wins and a draw that we maybe should have got 3 points recently. So by no means is that 45 minutes a reflection of the team. I'd said to the players there would be bumps in the road on the way, and it's maybe a bit of a bigger bump than we wanted, but ultimately that's we just got to ensure that it is that, just simply a bump, and we regroup. And obviously we've got a game, a Lanarkshire derby coming up soon to kick the split off, so we've got to make sure we get in the right place for that. You
said earlier, obviously you knew it was going to be a difficult game, but were you expecting such a high scoreline like that?
I don't think anyone was. I think even in the stand, I think Montrose were probably surprised that they've ended up winning the game by that much. But you know, it's one of these things. It's not a great result. You don't never want to be on the end of that kind of scoreline, especially against a team around about you. But it's ultimately down to us to make sure that doesn't happen again, and react properly. And that's something that's 100% in our control. And that's what my job is over the next few sessions, is to make sure that we just get back to doing all the good things that we have been doing.
Is this break coming at a good time for you guys as we go into this cup weekend?
No, I would rather get another game.
I
think the players would rather get another game. I think this is where the scheduling in the league is strange. We've got a Scottish Cup now, followed by a league game, followed by a League Cup final. So in March we play 2 league games in something like 5 weeks. So it's a bit of a strange scheduling, but ultimately that's out with our control. So it is what it is. You know, from the point of view, we get maybe a little bit longer to work on a few things, but for me, I would rather just actually be working towards a game right away. But, you know, as I say, it is what it is.
Yeah, well, let's look at the other end of the table then. We've got Rangers, who are 4 points ahead of Celtic, but Celtic and Glasgow City are both tied on 56. We've got that middle section, which is really tight as well, and then the bottom half, Aberdeen, Motherwell, Spartans, really tight, and the bottom 3, Montrose, Dundee United and Hamilton Accies. Alison, a 3-0 win for Rangers at the weekend. Big players for them, Rio Hardy and Mia Macaulay. What have you made of them this season?
Yeah, I think we've said it repeatedly this season that they've been the team to beat. I think they've set the pace in the league, still unbeaten, of course. I thought it was quite an interesting game on Sunday. I think maybe the first time it'd be a stretch, I think, to say that Joe Potter was under pressure, Rangers were under pressure, but I think maybe just a few people looking to see how they would react to the draw against Celtic, the draw against Hearts. Obviously the lead had been cut down to 4 points, so I think just a wee bit of intrigue in how they would cope with that, and I think they came through it, you know, essentially with flying colours. I think a fairly comfortable win in the end with the goals, just seeing them through and protecting that 4 point cushion. And now going into the split, it does get interesting because you're going to have teams round about one another all vying to take points off them. And I think when you have that three-way fight at the top, and you have to remember that second place opens the door to Champions League qualifiers, so it's a significant carrot for MD, that I think obviously Celtic, Rangers and Glasgow City will look to mop up any points that are spilled when they each go up against one another.
Did those high scorelines, was that almost a statement from both Celtic and Glasgow City as I don't count us out here, we're still very much in this?
I think Celtic in particular, I think you've seen a regrouping almost since the opening weeks of Elena Sadiku's first games in charge. I think they look much more cohesive, much more comfortable. They've obviously changed their shape, but they look like Celtic of old. I thought they looked, for a while, they looked like a shell of Fran Alonso's team just in those opening weeks after his departure. I think maybe some of that might come down to the suddenness of the announcement, the way he departed. But I think they've definitely steadied a bit. I thought, obviously very comfortable. Yes, Amy Gallagher has been scoring goals. I don't know what her tally is so far, but I think she's still top scorer in the league. Another hat-trick yesterday, and Celtic are back in amongst the goals. An interesting one, Glasgow City, I thought that 8-1 win, I had expected more from Aberdeen. I thought that might have been a closer game. I think it was 3-2 when they had met earlier in the season. I had thought that it might be quite tight, but yeah, I do think it's indicative really of just what you have at the top level between the top three teams and everyone else. I think there is a huge chasm between them and everyone else.
I think both Glasgow City and Celtic obviously getting there the goals, it just puts you in the back foot straight away, and Aberdeen and Partick Thistle have both, and they're not the only teams, have both struggled away to both those teams, and I think particularly Partick Thistle, the bigger pitches don't really suit them. They defend that Petershill Park so well, and it's a big part of their game plan, but they have taken a few of the heavier score lines away at Celtic, where it's very, very difficult on the bigger pitch. But yeah, I think that will be a disappointing one for Aberdeen. I think they played very, very well against Glasgow City in the first match early in the season, and they were maybe looking for a little bit of momentum coming into the split as well. And obviously, similar to ourselves, a heavy defeat, regardless of who it's against, is it's not a nice way to end the kind of first portion of the season.
You've got a team of young players, Robert. Amia Macaulay, she's only 17. She's doing exceptionally well at Rangers just now. How do we keep her in Scotland and that she's not one of the ones that gets swept off to England or further afield?
I think it's very difficult. I think even for the 5 full-time teams, if someone down south comes calling, it's going to be hard. We saw that with Emma Watson going down to Manchester United. That's going to be very difficult. And the challenge for Rangers now is, can they keep Kirsty McLean and can they keep Mia Macaulay? Because I'd imagine teams will be having a look, because down south they have the funds to essentially take a punt on a player, and take a risk and hopefully develop them to be something even better. And obviously you want to see that work out for a young player from here. But I've sat here before and said that the league and I think Scottish FA need to do more for our clubs. If the full-time teams can't keep these players, then what hope have the rest of us got? It's very, very difficult to try and develop the league as it is, and not everything is down to money, but it can help a massive amount in terms of keeping players and allowing players to train more. And I think that's the big thing, that we need to find a way to try and help all the clubs. And it's not just about the other 7 teams in Premier League 1, it's about helping the teams in Premier League 2 as well, and raising the standard there, so when teams come up, they're also not coming into a situation that we unfortunately saw with Glasgow a couple of years ago, where they were just so far behind. You want the team to come up to be able to come and challenge, like Montrose have been able to do this year.
And that's a benefit for the big teams, Alison, having younger players like that who can hit the ground running, but also a worry that they can be taken away so early, and like Robert says, it leaves a gap.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing is, and what you'll probably see more over the next few years, is the fruits of academies. Academies for girls coming through are still fairly embryonic. It's still quite new. You're still developing players. It's only recently that I think you've had maybe full-time coaches going into girls section. So I think you will see more players developing, coming through at first team level, and I think there is scope. I think all managers in the top level have shown that they're willing to give young players an opportunity to bring them in if they think they're good enough. Emma Watson's a classic case, but I think realistically, I think you have to embrace the fact that if you're producing players, other big teams are going to come in and take them. I think you have to see it from almost a different point of view. I think you have to celebrate that if you're bringing players through of a particular standard and they're deemed good enough to go and play south of the border, that we should be applauding it, because the difference in league structure, finances, quality, when you look at the league in England and you look at what we have in Scotland, it's night and day. And I think it bodes well if we're producing players who are capable of playing at that level. We've got to be encouraging it. We've got to be saying we welcome them going south, because that then bleeds into the national team. It raises the standard of the national team. I agree, ultimately the long-term ambition has to be to grow the profile of the league, to raise the standards of the league. But I think where we are just now, I think it's a compliment to the coaching structures if you're going to be able to have players capable of going down.
I think the compensation model's a big issue.
Compensation model's huge.
For the problem, and it's not necessarily a Scottish FA problem, it's more a FIFA UEFA problem in the wider, because they set the rules around about it. So if you've got a Mia Macaulay, for example, now a team from down south might be able to pay that compensation fee, that's fine, but let's just say that a team from down south can't pay or decides not to sign her, and she's maybe Rangers have decided at 17, do you know what, you're not good enough to play for Rangers, you're going to have to go and find somewhere else. A club like us probably couldn't afford that compensation fee. So if a club in Scotland's not willing to pay the value of that compensation fee, that player's effectively now out the game. And where does that money go to then redevelop the next player? So it's quite difficult, because academies and clubs aren't cash rich. And even to the extent of, and this is where the sort of part-time, full-time becomes problematic, is in the men's game you've still got 35 clubs that are full-time and have that income structure and have 2 leagues of completely full-time teams. We've got less than, about 25% of our top 2 leagues are full-time out of 20 teams. That in itself's going to maybe create problems later on down the line, and that's why we need to find revenue streams to try and help the clubs and, to be able to help young players that if they're not maybe quite ready to go down south, they can play at a good standard here. And I think that's really where someone like Mick McArdle at Scottish FA, they've taken over the youth game and they're working very, very hard to try and improve that. And having met Mick a few times, I know how passionate he is about it, and I think we really will see the fruits of that over the next couple of years, because I know how hard him and his team are working with clubs to ensure that we just raise the standards and make the standards better, and full-time coaches as one of those things, or at least paid coaches for their time.
Just on the full-time, part-time thing as well, do you guys feel slightly out of the loop as such when you look at the 5 teams who are full-time? You feel that there could be a better financial structure to help teams like Hamilton, Motherwell, who are part-time?
Yeah, I mean, I've said to the league and that actually the distribution model, although when we went into it, was done with the best of intentions and completely understandable for the way that we did it. I think if you for finishing bottom, you'll get around about £10,000. If you finish top, I think it's in the area of £35,000, give or take. So if you're already full time and investing a large 6-figure or even a 7-figure sum, what's £40,000 to you? And I think that's where all clubs have got to ask hard decisions. I agree that we need to have reward for competition, but then for me that's the Champions League. You go in and you make more money for playing in the Champions League because you get more money for playing in that. So actually, is distributing this money to the teams that aren't full time, is that better? I think there's a conversation to be had around about that. I'm not saying that's the answer, but I think we need to, clubs, if we really are serious about improving the whole game, I think clubs we've got to try and leave self-interest sometimes, and I know that's very difficult, and supporters and things like that want the best for your club, and I completely understand that, but the game's at that point where actually we still need to club together and work for each other. It's not quite at that tribalistic almost where the men's game is. It's about looking after yourself. I don't think we're there yet.
It's a really interesting point actually, because last year I was really surprised. Last year I'd spoken to one chief exec about the finances around the Champions League, and they were essentially saying that it costs the club money. They actually lose money from competing in the Champions League once you take into account increased policing costs, everything that you need to meet UEFA requirements for your stadium, your travel costs, hotel costs, that in actual fact, unless you're going fairly deep into the tournament, it actually costs you money. You're not actually making any money out of it, and that becomes a wider conversation too, where we need to be looking at like what's UEFA doing, what's the trickle down effect of the economics at the very top level all the way down, because for Scottish clubs, for European football to be costing money is a really difficult position to be in.
Mm-hmm. Are they doing enough, UEFA, do you feel? Do you think they could be doing more for the women's game?
I think they're trying to amplify it. I think you've seen competition money has gone up season on season. I think it's maybe just about how that's redistributed, because I think you are in danger almost of replicating what you've seen in the men's side in a smaller scale, whereas you have a few particular countries who monopolise the tournament and monopolise the competition. I think you want to be widening it as much as possible, and I think you've seen it. I think across the last decade you've seen the disparity of where Scottish teams were once on a level. You think Glasgow City have twice been at the quarter-finals of the Champions League already now. I think that feels as though it's significantly further away.
Yeah. Well, let's have a look at the games coming up at the weekend. We've got some Scottish Cup quarter-finals to look ahead to. We've got Hibs versus Rangers, Livingston against Spartans, Thistle will take on Hearts, Montrose, Celtic. Ali, Hibs Rangers, they'll face back-to-back. Can that be a benefit for both sides in this?
Yeah, I think it makes it a bit awkward actually sometimes. I think you're coming out one game and going straight back into the same opposition. So, yeah, I think it can make it a wee bit predictable and a bit awkward. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Again, I'm not sure I can see Hibs taking anything from Rangers. I think, and then Rangers, of course, in a fortnight will have the Sky Sports Cup final at Tynecastle to look forward to against Partick Thistle. I think they're very much a team that look capable of going and claiming a treble this term. The point that you made earlier, Robert, was that the cup fixtures are in amongst the league. It's all a bit up and down. Can that be confusing to players as well when you're trying to?
I think just yourself? I think just you end up sometimes, if you get knocked out a cup, you can end up with a lot of breaks. Mm-hmm. I know there's conversation around the clubs about the number of games that you play, but actually if you get knocked out the cups quite early and play 32 league games, it feels about right for us. And the argument for teams that go further in the cup is they could play upwards of 40 games, then they maybe have international players away as well. So the balance isn't sometimes quite right, but I feel if you get knocked out a cup early, you need games, otherwise what are we doing, So I think just for me the scheduling just needs to be, I just don't see why putting cup dates close together. I think we need to try and look at putting cup dates a little bit further apart. Yeah. If it was a cup, play 2 league games a cup, then, but we're effectively now got cup, league. Mm-hmm. So why could we not move the cup date forward or back one,
Yeah, well, a hard game to call, I think, will be Thistle against Hearts. Hearts have won the majority of the last few fixtures between the two, but Thistle are obviously, they've done really well this season. That'll be a difficult one for both of them, I think.
Yeah, I think Partick being at home as well, like I say, they are formidable opposition at Petershill. They've found a formula that really, really works with them. I think Brian's looked at, obviously the Rangers game, changed shape and almost played with double fullbacks, which really worked for them. Mm-hmm. And they got a well-deserved draw out of that one. So I think that that's probably the most intriguing game for me as well. I wouldn't rule out what might be considered an upset. I know they're both top 6 teams, but I think Hearts are good, but can be a little bit ponderous in possession sometimes. I think they're still working towards being a little bit more ruthless. Mm-hmm. Maybe still looking to bring 1 or 2 players in just to move them on to that next step. But Thistle, just if they get ahead, they're the last team you want in the world to get ahead of you, because they're so difficult to break down, and their centre back pairing and their centre midfield so experienced and can make things so hard for you. So I think for me that's the game of the round. Should
we pick our semi-final before we finish off then? Ali, Hibs, Rangers, who do you think goes through here?
I think Rangers.
Robert?
Rangers.
Livingston, Spartans?
I'm probably going to say Spartans.
Right.
I think Spartans will win that fairly comfortably.
Right, and Thistle Hearts?
I'm going to stick with Partick Thistle.
Yeah?
I'm going to go with Thistle as well.
Right, okay, and finally Montrose, Celtic?
I think Celtic.
I think Celtic. I just can't see Montrose have, a bit like us, they've struggled against the kind of full-time teams, and it's very difficult. So I just can't see. I think Celtic are on a little run at the moment and are just building confidence. Well, the panel have made their predictions. We would love to hear yours. I will be back next week with another guest to look forward to and some more action to speak about. We'll see you then. Thanks for watching.